Welcome to Fast Track, brought to you by Aera, the podcast where we help you get into your first home faster. I'm Chereè and with me, Aera founder Derek Handley. In this episode, we're taking it right back to basics. We're going to take a look at house prices and how the housing market actually works. So Derek, will we talk about strategy and that game plan? At what sort of point do you see looking at house prices actually come into play, like right at those final stages or earlier?
Much earlier, because once you figure out like your deposit, your earning income at the moment, and your capacity to save, that should help you figure out what is your likely achievable house price in the next 1, 2, or 3 years. If you detach the two, then you're kind of doing something on the side, like saving or earning, that's unrelated to, well, what price you're going for. So you kind of have to reverse it as early as possible to think, okay, I'm going to try and buy a house that's $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 within 1, 2, 3 years.
So when it comes to a first home buyer's ideal price range, now obviously this can change depending on maybe where you live in the country and what your your earnings are, but is there a specific bracket you would say is best to aim for?
Definitely. So I think the thing that changes in the country is not so much the price, but what you're going to get for it. The price bracket is pretty much the same. It's something between $650 and I would say $750 to $800. So the median first home buyer's house price is roughly $650 to $700. If you are buying a first home between $650 to $850, you're going to get pretty much the entry-level home. And across the country, it will look different. If it's in Auckland or Christchurch, it will look different, but the price is still the same thing. So if you're aiming for something that's $650, $700, $750, you're exponentially more likely to achieve it than if you're thinking about a villa that's 1.2 million or 1 million or 1.5 million, which is what you see on the internet or what you see on TradeMe. So the key thing is realizing that the entry point can be anywhere as low as $550, $600, but most people are trying to come in at $650, $750.
So why would you say that's the ideal price? Is that because it kind of would get you into the market hopefully quicker in terms of, your age and where you're at in life? Also the mortgage repayments?
Exactly. So there's both of those components are true. So for $650 or $750, you need 65 to 75K, right? Obviously with Aera, we contribute 10K. So that becomes like 55 to 65. It's eminently achievable for two couples. The average Kiwi saver for two couples who are about 30, for two people in a couple, is about 22 each. So that's 44. So then you're like almost only just 10 or 15K away. And that becomes like, wow, I can actually save that in a year for almost anybody in New Zealand, right, who doesn't have a large family. So bringing that goal to reality and much closer than what people mostly think is the key thing. So if you're looking at 650 to 750, it's far closer to a lot of people than they realize. And then from a income and mortgage repayments perspective, it's maybe $600 to $700 a week, which if you're two people and you're, renting 2 rooms, that's going to be at least $500 anywhere in New Zealand. And it's like, it's only $100 to $200 more a week to pay the mortgage instead of paying rent.
It's money essentially going to your future self,
exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Plus, if there's an extra bedroom, someone else is going to pay you if you're renting it out, probably $200. So it's just a sweet spot where the mortgage repayments and the deposit for most New Zealanders, if there's 2 of them especially, it's like, wow, I can 100% achieve that.
Now, obviously, this sounds like the picture you've painted is kind of like the average couple, maybe in their early 30s type thing, possibly don't have kids at this point. What would you say then to, say, a young family, say they've got 2 young kids and they want to buy their first home, when they might be thinking, we don't want to buy something that's maybe too small that we feel like will outgrow really quickly, so they might need to look at a bigger price range. Like, what are those other kind of components they need to consider?
Psychologically, that's really interesting because if you think I might put this off for 3 or 4 or 5 years because I want to have a house that's big enough for my growing family, it could be the most damaging thing you could do, because if the house prices go up even 2 or 3% a year over 5 years, it's going to be a lot more expensive to buy the house. So we always advocate that you get in early, you have a smaller house. Toddlers, young kids, they don't know that it's a small house. They're just living in it and having a lot of fun with you. And they put 2 of them in a room or whatever. And then by the time they go to they're 8, 9, 10, they might need more space. But the key thing is, if you've got a young family, we would always say, buy the house you can afford as soon as you can afford it, so you can raise your family in a home that you own, that you're not subject to the whims of a landlord, and then upgrade over time when you really are bursting at the seams. as opposed to the other way around, which is almost certainly going to cost you way more. And your demands and the things that you're going to need in a house when you're starting to get kids that you're thinking, oh, they're going to be teenagers soon, we're going to need 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms. It overcomplicates the whole process and expands what you're going to need.
When you're starting to look at houses, when you're at the point of, perusing Trade Me or just trying to get a feel for like what a certain amount could buy you in the city you live in, maybe you want to decide if you want to move to Christchurch or Auckland or whatever. Obviously, new homes, the prices are generally listed. Like that's the price, what you're getting. So you can get a pretty good idea of what you're going to get for what amount of money. But I know with older homes, they'll be like priced by negotiation or, and it can be quite frustrating, I guess, if you're a first time buyer looking at both of those options, because a lot of the time it's either an auction or they don't really give you any indication. And when you're new to the housing market, you're probably like, I have no idea where this house would fit in the price range.
Yeah. And that's one of the key risks of trying to buy a home that's not with a price on it, right? Which is almost all homes in New Zealand that are existing homes, they don't have a price. So if you go to real estate window, in the streets and you look at it, almost all of them won't have a price.
Why is that?
It's very frustrating. I don't know why it is in New Zealand, but all the vendors, people selling the homes, are represented by an agent who's trying to sell the home, who wants to maximize the price. In other markets, there is a buyer's agent who will help you find a home. And so there's more of an equal partnership, and the price becomes something that's easier to find, right? In New Zealand, we have this strange system where they're so reluctant to put a price on it, it's almost like they've given up, like they're not trying to market the home anymore. And so you never know what the price is. The compounding difficulty with that is like then the agent's incentive is not to give you a clear indication of the price. Their whole incentive is to get at least 2 people interested in the house, which then starts putting pressure on the price to go up.
Right, so they can almost pit 2 people.
Exactly. They always want more people interested in the house than 1, because once there's 2 people, they'll start bidding against each other. If there's 3, it can obviously compound exponentially. And their main job, if it says auction, the main job of a real estate agent, and if you ask any of them and ask them to tell the truth, the main job at an auction is to get registered bidders signed up the day before the auction, which means they will convince anyone that the house may sell in the price that they are likely to be able to afford. So let's say you can afford 700 because your Aera coach or your mortgage advisors told you that's what you can afford. Even though they know the seller wants 800, they will convince you that maybe you get it for 700. Just register and bid and be at the auction, because they want more bidders. And so all of this stuff is designed to create upward pressure on the house price and opacity. So like people don't know actually what price this house is going to go for. For us, as first home buyer, like kind of specialists and coaches, we think this is really dangerous for first home buyers, because you never know what you're going to get into. You still have to do the builder's inspection. You still have to like decide you're ready to buy the house, all the research, and you bid. And most often you would lose out multiple times until you get a success. That's why we love like buying a new home, which is like, here's the price.
So when it comes to the housing market itself, what actually affects the prices? Because I feel like a lot of people probably don't understand like what's happening in the economy or around the world that affects our prices here in New Zealand, whether they're going up, staying the same, or going down.
It's a great question. And when you see these cycles happen, every time they go up or the market softens, you have a whole bunch of commentators, generally Joe Public, thinking that's it, that's the end of the house price rise, like it's all going to crash now. And when you step back and you look at it from 10 or 20 or 30 years, you're like, that is never going to happen in this lifetime, right? And the fundamental reason behind that is there's limited land close to where people want to live. New Zealand is not a country where people live in skyscrapers, by and large. Some people live in apartments, but 99%
it's not
people,
the Kiwi life dream,
it's not the
right?
life dream, right? So then you need more land to build houses. We are one of the most amazing countries in the world, so you constantly have an influx of people from much larger countries. South Africa, India, China, literally billions of people around the world want to live in New Zealand. So you're constantly having people increase the demand on residences in New Zealand. So from a really simple supply and demand situation, you've got like, there's way more people out in the world that want to come in. Hundreds of millions of them, right? We're really terrible at building houses. We're slow. It's very expensive. We literally custom build every house, right? So if you go to big cities where they build apartment blocks or whatever, they can do the same thing and build 1,000 houses in one go. Whereas we literally buy a piece of land, put all the timber in and build a house with a bunch of builders and do it again and again and again. So it's really expensive. all the materials that are involved in that process, they're never going to be cheaper. So all the materials, it's copper, wood, land, they just keep going up. So just the cost of building a house, the materials, the labor, so you're never going to be able to pay a builder cheaper in 5 or 10 years to build a house. All of those basic things will constantly go up, right? Plus the demand issue of people wanting to come to New Zealand. So on the long curve, like in the next 20 years, unless we totally redesign how we build houses and how people want to live in New Zealand, the only long-term answer is it will get more and more expensive.
You're reminding me of the jib shortage that we had a few years
Exactly.
ago, and like people were stealing jib off of building sites because it was so expensive, and we couldn't get it. Yeah, but as you say, like I feel like unless the Kiwi lifestyle dream changes, which I don't think it will, then that's not going to happen, because also, you know, Kiwis love this idea of having your own little house, and like we're still coming around to how new builds are designed to be able to have more, you know, in one space.
Yeah.
And that for a lot of Kiwis is still kind of like a new thing that they're not used to.
Exactly. But if you go to a big city like London or New York, people are very happy to live next to each other or have one floor in a building, and it's an amazing experience to even have your own space in those cities. And if we want to be a mature country and all those kinds of things, that's what's going to happen, right? And you have to let go of this idea that everyone's got a garden. And actually, because we've got so many people coming from elsewhere in the world, they're very happy to live in those situations as well. So all those things factor into why house prices change. The last piece is, which is more temperamental, is the interest rates. So when the interest rates are really high, then it might put some dampener on the house prices, which is what we've seen in the last few years because they were so high so quickly. When they come back down, then the demand increases. So it's kind of like that's the final factor of what might change things. And the other thing that impacts is when people feel like their houses are going up, then they start spending more, they might buy another house, and that puts even more pressure on the house prices. So it's kind of like this reinforcing cycle.
So what actually impacts the value of a house? So why does an old villa that's basically falling apart in Ponsonby can be sold for $2 million, where a new home could be sold for $600,000? Is it the land or the
It's probably
area?
the combination of the area. So like they're not making any more Ponsonbys, right? And Ponsonby is filled with all these amazing old villas. They're all smashed next to each other, right? Nobody's got a lot of space, but they've got a little piece of land. They're a beautiful little villa, and they are right next to the city, right? So if you took that same piece of land and that same villa and put it all the way down in, say, Pukekohe or Drury, obviously it would sell for a fraction. It would still sell for more than like a townhouse, but the idea that people want this little slice of the old Kiwiana history almost at the doorstep of the city is what creates this value. Like, I think, you know, of this amazing villa and a small piece of land right next to the center of the city. You don't have to commute.
You're almost paying for the land more than the house, because some of these houses you basically have to demo the thing. It's like so much work.
Totally refurb it, which is what most people do in those kind of in situations where there's a villa.
and
It's so
takes time.
expensive. So they take a $1 million house and they spend $1 million on it to fix it, right? And so then you're buying a house that actually someone has invested a huge amount of money in to upgrade. You know, when they have these stories in the paper like, oh, this house used to be 200,000 20 years ago and it's just sold for $4 million. They don't also add that, well, that person invested $2 million improving the house, you know?
When we look at the housing market currently in this year, a bit different to what I think a lot of people predicted at the start of the year, and it really has, it sort of seems like, I don't know how you describe it, but almost a bit stagnant, gone backwards a little bit. Is that a lot to do with people's fear of overpaying, and what do we wait for? What's going to happen for it to turn, where that turns into FOMO and then people go, I've got to buy a house now?
So it's also not uniform across the country, right? So different parts of the country have performed differently. So like Canterbury or the West Coast, there's places that have performed and are growing because the demand or whatever has outpaced, say, supply, and they've gone up. And then there are places that have been quite stagnant or even devastated, like Wellington has suffered a lot, right? So Wellington has a whole bunch of issues, including the fact that there's a lot of people who have lost their jobs in Wellington. So if you don't have a job, you can't buy a house, right? And Wellington's a pretty dense, compact place where a lot of these government jobs and other things have disappeared over the last 18 months. So right now it's a lull, I would say. Like it's kind of just flattened out. In Auckland, for example, post the boom, they built a lot of houses. So they had consented, they'd approved, they planned to build a lot of houses. So the last 18 months, those houses arrived, and there were more than the number of buyers that were willing to buy those houses at the time. So what's going on is the people are just slowly clearing out that stock. And so the prices kind of stay flat, or they might go down a little bit until that stock kind of clears out. And then once we go back to which is the usual situation in New Zealand, which is we don't have enough houses, then you end up with what you were talking about, which is more like FOMO. And we're seeing hints of that where maybe a couple of Aera members will be interested in the same house, and then a week later that house won't be available. And that wasn't the case maybe a year ago, but it's more like people are realizing, okay, now is actually a really good time. And then you start thinking, well, if I don't make a decision, I'll have to start all over again because that option will be taken off the table, you know?
Yeah. It's like what happened in COVID times. People kind of freaked out.
Yeah.
Like, we've got to buy a house.
I mean, that was pretty extreme.
It was. Bit
Because
of a
if
blip
you
on the
Yeah, because
graph.
if you went to an open home, there might have been 50, 100 people that day.
Yeah.
I definitely went to the open homes where it was like ants. There were just hundreds of people dawning on this thing. And then you know that at the end of that day, there's going to be 10 people that are going to try and buy that house. And so you have to act quickly and da-da-da. Obviously, no one wants to go back to that because it's super stressful. It makes people boxed into a corner to make decisions really quickly. And hopefully we're not going to go to an environment that is that pressured, but it will get more pressured as we go into next year where it's like, well, if you want something, you need to make a decision.
Yeah. And so if you want to buy a home, you need to know where you're at, what the prices that you're looking for, and understanding even the basics of the housing market definitely helps. I don't think you've got to know everything there is to know or be someone who's really into the economics, but I think just understanding a little bit about what affects makes a big difference. Yeah.
And I think the main thing is if you're buying a first home, you're buying it to live in it as a part of your, I guess, financial portfolio, but you're not buying it to sell it, right? It's not like you're trading stocks. So the main thing is if you're comfortable, you want to live there, you think you can imagine yourself for 3, 4, or 5 years, then you can think about, well, what's the value of that house in 3, 4, or 5 years? And that's the most important thing. It's like, if you think, if I buy it now and it's flat in a year, I don't want to like not make money. That's something you shouldn't be factoring in because this is your home. It's not an investment property per se. If you stay in it, you live in it for a while, then it's always going to grow with you. And that's kind of the main thing that you should be thinking about.
Absolutely. Thanks, Derek. And thank you for listening to this episode of Fast Track. If you loved it, send it to a friend or a family member who might be on their first home journey. Click subscribe and you can check us out on socials, fasttrack_pod. And we'll catch you next time.